Hi there everyone, welcome to an episode of Skis Productions. Today I'm going to be showing you the difference between a photo shot on a camera phone and a photo shot on an actual standard camera. So this is going to be a photo shot on my Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra using the rear wide camera on the Ultra, and it's shot in 4080 by 3060 and it's a 35 megabyte file. I shot this in Samsung Expert RAW. So this is a digital negative file. Digital negatives are basically the same thing as a RAW file. Focal length 6.3 millimeters, so it actually has a physical zoom lens on the back of the camera. Shutter speed is 1/1500th of a second. Aperture was wide open at f1.7. ISO is set at the lowest at 50. Over here at the one shot on my full frame camera, which is a Canon EOS R6 Mark II. RF 24105 f4L IS USM lens, and it was shot in 6K, and you can see it actually is a smaller file size shot in Canon's RAW format, which is CR3. Now it was shot at full zoom at 105 millimeters, 1/1250th of a second, aperture f4, which is wide open for this lens, ISO 100, which is the lowest you can go on the Canon R6 Mark II. This is a full frame mirrorless camera for those of you who don't know. The camera on the S24 Ultra is just a digital camera. Alright, so first off, let's start out with some differences between the images. So this is how they both look straight out of the cameras. So over here, if you ever get an image that looks really dull from an actual camera when you're viewing a RAW file, make sure you have camera standard selected as your color profile instead of Adobe color. And if you have Adobe color selected, it's going to look really dull. It's not going to have any color to it. Select camera standard. Alright, you're going to notice that there's different temperatures between these images. So this one you can see was shot in Samsung Expert RAW. Comes up profile, Samsung Expert RAW. And this one usually turns out warmer than the other. So I'm just going to go ahead and cool it down a little bit. It doesn't really seem to... I'm just going to cool it down a little bit just to kind of get things to match a little bit better. And that's the only adjustment I did so far. First thing we're going to notice is that when you shoot on an actual camera, you're going to have a depth of field that you don't get on a digital camera. You don't get any depth of field on a digital camera. Typically, with a f1.7 aperture lens, which is what this is, you would have a very narrow depth of field. That would mean that basically anything other than the subject is going to be out of focus. Now, even on this actual camera's, this has f4 aperture, so it's not too wide of an aperture, but it's just wide enough that you can start to notice stuff like this. So you can notice stuff over here, how the foreground is out of focus on this one, whereas on the digital image here, shot on the Samsung, it's not out of focus. It tries to keep everything in the focus. Now, it could be a good thing or a bad thing. Basically, if you want more things to be in focus and within the depth of field, all you do on an actual camera is just stop down your aperture, and it helps bring more things into focus, give you a larger depth of field. Now, one thing that's important to note on an actual camera is you can't go larger than your aperture is set to be on your lens, but you can always go smaller. So that's why I always say go with a aperture of basically the largest aperture you can afford. That way you can always stop it down if you need to, but it gives you more versatility when it comes to shooting in different lighting situations. So if you go in the really low light situations, you can open up your aperture and get a lot more light captured by a sensor. So like I was saying, you're going to get a depth of field on an actual camera. So what that does is it draws focus to your subject. So like here, this is my subject. It's going to be my Velomobile sitting in my backyard. And if you look from the zoomed out area, see how everything else is kind of in the way here. This is kind of in focus. Here, you don't really notice it. It really draws your attention to the center here. Or here, it doesn't, even though I had the focus point set for center focus. Again, I shot this all manual on my phone. Manual and RAW on my phone. And another thing we're going to notice is when we start doing pixel peeping here, I'm going to show you that where the AI generation really leaves it lacking. So here on the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra, I shot in 50 megapixels. Now, how it shoots in 50 megapixels is that it takes your 24 megapixel lens. It basically takes your 24 megapixel lens and it generates pixels using AI. And I'm going to prove that to you here in a minute, how it generates AI using AI. And I'll show you examples of where it messed up at, where it generated with AI. All right. And basically doubles your megapixel count from your 24 megapixel camera sensor. All right. This is a 24 megapixel camera. So the Canon EOS R6 Mark II is a 24 megapixel camera. Now, if you're a newbie to photography, you might be saying, oh, well, why would you want to have a 24 megapixel camera when your Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra has a 24 megapixel camera built into it, and the S24 Ultra can shoot 50 megabytes or 50 megapixels. My bad. Get those confused quite often. So as a newbie, I didn't know the answer to this either. So that's when I decided to start renting cameras and seeing for myself. And it really shows when you crop in. So here we're going to go ahead and crop in on this subject here. So here's my Venomobile a little bit closer up. And we're going to do the same thing here. Now you can see there's quite a big difference. Let me just try to zoom in a little bit more. So you can see there's quite a level of detail that's been lost once you start zooming in to this Venomobile here. Now, one thing I'm going to point out here is you can read the lettering here. You can read this decal. You cannot read the lettering here. If you didn't have this image here, you would have no idea what this says. So this says Marine Veteran, has an eagle, globe, and anchor here. And you actually can't even see the symbol here. And that's due to AI generating the pixels. All right, so if we go in, let's just zoom in even more on this one shot on the actual camera over here near the lettering. And I'll show you where the AI got rid of stuff. All right, so here you can see all this is kind of just mumbled together and it's all pixelated. You can't make anything out. And here there's supposed to be an emblem badge here with bulk design on it. And what AI did is that it got rid of it. It basically said, oh, well, this is kind of white. So the majority of the pixels here are white. So we're just going to make this whole area white and blurred it out. Here you can see there's actually a design there that says bulk design. And we can see further evidence of this if we go up here to the carbon fiber headrest. So let's go up here to carbon fiber headrest. You can't even tell it's carbon fiber on the image shot on my camera on my smartphone. And here you can see the weaves of the carbon fiber. You can see the texture of the carbon fiber here going across. Also, this is a metallic paint. Now, in this image, you can actually see some of the metallic flakes. Here, it's so pixelated, you can't make anything out. There's also a turn signal here with lettering on it. You can see some of the lettering here. You can't see anything here. And also on this headrest here, on the foam headrest, you can make out it has humps and crevices and stuff like that. And you see it's foam. On here, you can't see the texture, and it actually cut off one of the bumps here because of AI generation. Now, zoom back out, and we're going to zoom into right here. So this blade of grass here, something I noticed when I was editing. This is going to be another example of how AI cheats you out. So basically, this is how AI works. It duplicates the pixels around it. So what happened here, you can see this blade of grass is blue. How is a blade of grass blue when it's actually green? As you can see, it's actually green. So what happened was AI generated the extra pixels and mixed it in with the green. And you can see how it just kind of turned it white in the middle, and it has like this sheen around it. It has like a halo around it. And up here, you can see it's solid blue. Like, there's no denying that it's not supposed to be, like, the individual pixels are actually blue. Here, you can see that right here. It kind of tried to make the square down here more. It's solid blue. Here, on this image, we can see the pixels are green. Blue and white, green. There's a huge loss of detail there where AI is assuming what the pixels are. And it does this with most of the images that you take on your smartphone camera. Especially if you shoot JPEG, it's even worse. And you'll notice that right along the body line here, along the bottom here, see how this is, you can clearly define what's grass and what's the body. You can see reflections of the grass off the body. So like if I zoom in here, you can see grass reflecting off the body. Here, the grass, right, basically from here on up, it's been made to different colors. So you can see it's been whited out, it's been made blue. There's no reflections. Actually, if you zoom in to this one that we saw a reflection on in the other image, there's no reflection on that grass. So right here, you got a reflection. Here, there's just kind of like a black area there. There's no reflection. And that's just another example of the AI generation of how it's messing it up. Now, another thing we're going to notice if we go up here and we take a look at the grass up front. So we're going to take a look at the grass up front. And we're going to see another example of the AI generation messing up. So we're going to take a look at the grass up here. So this is where you're going to see the differences at. So you can see this piece of grass here has a black halo around it. See that? See that little ring going around this blade of grass? That's because it's taking the black pixels from the shadow and making it into the blade of grass. And it basically when it combines it together, it makes it into a white blade of grass. And here, you don't have that haloing effect. You got a lot more detail here. Also, this bottom color here is also metallic blue. So you can even see a little bit of the metallic flakes here in this image. So especially up here in the light, you can see the metallic blue flakes. And if we go up here to this reflective decal, we're going to show you something that's pretty obvious, even from far away. So even if I zoom out, let's take a look here. I'll show you something that I noticed right away. Something I noticed right away is I have turn signals right here. These two little white dots right here. Where are they? Well, I'll tell you what happened. You got kind of like a whitish orange here. And what happened was AI said, well, most of the pixels around here are orange. I'm going to go ahead and make these orange because those are probably just reflections or something like that. Well, they're not. They're actually turn signals there. And when we zoom in on this one, you can clearly see turn signals here. And they're actually down here. And all you see is maybe slight resemblance of them. And even if we look at this reflective decal here on the image shot on my camera, you can see the squares from the reflector. And these are actually the texture of the reflector. So it has these little squares that reflect light in different directions. On the smartphone photo, you can't tell that even zoomed out. If you zoom in, you just see pixels. All right, so it's just overall you're losing a lot of data, a lot of quality, a lot of details when you go to crop in an image shot on a smartphone camera. Another thing I'll say is that the level of detail you can get from an actual camera versus a smartphone camera is just amazing. Like we'll just do this as if I was just going to crop this. Like I shot this from a little bit far away and I was just going to crop it and print it out. These are two different images that you would get. Which one would you rather? So, I mean, look at this one. This one, you can see the individual blades of grass, even zoomed out like this. So in this one, Alright, we're going to zoom in. So in the one shot on my camera, on my standard camera, you can see the blades of grass in the background. You can see the weeds and everything like that. On the one shot on my smartphone, everything kind of just blurs and blends in together. There's not really much detail once you zoom it in and crop it in. And say if you printed out a poster size image of this, it would look horrible. Now, I'm viewing this on a large TV screen, so you may not be able to see this, but so go ahead and zoom in here. Use that. So go ahead and use this mirror as a reference. So you can see how the mirror, the orange from the mirror, it kind of got blurred into the green grass in the background. You see that halo kind of like blurry area there? That's from the pixels being duplicated and being mixed in with the grass color. And that only happens on your smartphone. Go ahead and zoom in here. You can see the individual blades of grass. You don't get that blur effect around there. The pixels are also a lot larger on your digital camera because the sensor is a lot smaller. So when it comes down to camera quality and the detail that you get from your image from your individual cameras is going to be based off the sensor and the lens that you're using. So another thing to mention on a standard camera is you have zoom lenses, like the one I'm using here. I'm using a 24 to 105. So I got 105 millimeters of zoom versus 6.3 millimeters of zoom, which is going to give me a lot more detail with less megapixels. And also because even though this camera, the standard camera, the R6 Mark II, is 24 megapixels, the sensor size is, I don't even know how many hundreds of times larger it is than the camera phone's sensor, because the camera phone sensor is about the size of your fingernail tip on your pinky, or your fingernail on your pinky, whereas the full frame mirrorless sensor is about the size of the palm of your hand. So there's quite a lot of difference there. And what it does is it allows it to capture a lot more light data. So that means you can shoot in lower light conditions with a smaller aperture with a full frame mirrorless camera versus your smartphone camera. Also, on top of that, you have a built-in stabilization and everything in an actual standard camera, at least decent quality ones like the Canon R6 Mark II. I have body stabilization, and I also have lens image stabilization. So I have multiple stabilizers inside the camera, so I can shoot freeform at night without using a tripod. So I can just hold it in my hand, take a picture, and it's going to stabilize it for the most part. Whereas on my smartphone, you really need a tripod to shoot long exposure shots. And I know some people may not know that, oh, well, you got a 24 megapixel camera on your phone, you got a 24 megapixel full frame mirrorless camera, what the heck's the difference? Because in my mind, when I was new to photography last year, megapixels was everything. If it was all about megapixels and resolution. And the resolution does make a difference. So the 24 megapixels at 6K resolution, you can tell these pixels are smaller. So I can zoom in here. So these pixels are going to be smaller than they are on this image. So you can tell how much smaller these pixels are on this image versus this image. But also keep in mind, when you zoom in on a smartphone, most smartphones only have a digital zoom. They do not have a physical zoom lens, whereas an actual camera has a physical zoom lens. So you're actually magnifying the whole image to the sensor, whereas on a smartphone, when you zoom in on your smartphone, you're actually cropping the image digitally. You can do that on a full frame mirrorless camera, but that's kind of why you want to use zoom lenses, is so you capture more data from further away. Now, this wasn't captured from too far away. This was just shot across my yard. And again, these are going to be in two separate aspect ratios. So Canon camera shooting in 3:2, smartphone camera shooting in 4:3 aspect ratio. So this one's going to be a little bit more square. This one's going to be more rectangular. And another thing you're going to notice is here on the histogram, on the actual camera here, so let's go over to light settings. You can see you got a lot more detail here. You can tell by the little sharp peaks you have here and the little sharp peaks down here that you have a lot more data captured versus this, which is shot on the smartphone. See how it's more linear, it's more smooth? That means it's averaging the pixels together, it's averaging the colors and the lights together instead of giving you all the details. See how this has more spikes. And again, these are shot maybe a minute apart in the same lighting from the same distance. And another thing you're going to notice is most smartphones will shoot JPEG instead of RAW. Now, I did shoot RAW to compare this, but being able to shoot in RAW is a huge deal. I'll tell you why. Because RAW gives you so much more adjustability. So even if I go over here and say I want to increase my exposure a lot, or say decrease my exposure, or cover shadows, stuff like that. Say if I shot the image wrong. And in this instance, I exposed both the images properly, but let's say this one's probably a little bit on the darker side. Now this one's going to be easier to adjust. You just bring the shadows up, but notice how little bit the shadows move when I take that up. Versus the Canon camera, turn the shadows up. See how much more drastic that changes? If you just look up here on the histogram, look at how drastic it changes. Go down, up. Versus here, where it's not as drastic of a change. It's very small changes. So you can see, take a look in here. Blue is usually shadows. You can't really see much of a difference. So it's literally just from 0, I'm just going to do 0 or 1 up to there. Not much changes, like from here to here. On this one, just adjusting shadows, you can see quite a big adjustment. So it's probably going to move from here all the way over to here. Yeah, you can see how much it brought the shadows over. You don't have anything blacking out over here, whereas on this image, you still have shadows blacking out here. And same thing goes for highlights. So if we zoom in, here and we turn on the highlight warning. Look at the highlight warning areas versus the image is shot on this camera. Now when you have red areas, usually it means you can't really recover it that easily. So we're going to go ahead and turn on highlight warnings on this image. You got a little tiny spot there. No overexposure here, whereas you have here, it's overexposed. And another thing you're going to notice here is this intake vent here. Notice how there's a black liner in there. That's carbon fiber. In here, it made that black area orange. Just kind of another example of AI generation in the image, messing up your image. And even here, you'll see how it has blown out highlights here. And if you scroll back here, it doesn't have blown out highlights. You can see it's silver. And let's just try to turn down the highlights. See what we can recover. Can't recover much. Yeah, you can't really recover any of that. So you can still see it's still blowing out there. Can't see any detail there. Whereas on this image, that little tiny area I probably wouldn't even worry about on most situations. Let's just say we bring down the highlights a little bit. Or if we just do a mask of the area, so we'll just do a radial gradient. I don't need it. Don't need guidance here. Let's do a little bit radial gradient here. A little bit radial gradient here. Just like that. And all we're going to do is we're going to turn down the highlights on this one. And turn down exposure a little bit. Now normally I do a little bit better job and adjust the angle. Well, let me adjust the rotation. Where's the rotation? I forget how to adjust the rotation, but basically you got a lot more adjustability there. And we turn off this. You can tell it really doesn't take away from the image at all, whereas here it really takes away from the image. But at the end of the day, that's the difference between shooting on your smartphone and shooting on an actual camera. Now, megabytes are not everything, like I said. Sensor size is more important than the amount of megabytes the camera has. For example, the Canon R6 Mark II has a 24 megabyte or megapixel camera, whereas the Canon R5 has a 45 megapixel camera. Now, the R5, while it has a larger megapixel sensor, which means it captures more pixels in the same amount of area, what that means is that it can capture less light data per pixel, which means there's going to be less dynamic range. When you get into the lower light situation, it's going to be a lot harder to shoot in lower light with the R5 versus the R6 Mark II, which is why I chose the R6 Mark II. It's because I can shoot in lower light situations, and I don't need a super expensive lens with a large aperture to be able to get good image quality. Now, the R5 is going to be good for when you want to make poster shots, and you're going to need those extra pixels to say you're making a huge print of, let's just say like a 10-foot large print of a photo that you took, you're going to want those extra megapixels. Versus the R6 Mark II, which is going to be great for most other situations, and you don't need to have you don't need to have that pixel density. But at the end of the day, I hope this helps show you the differences between the two and how the 50 megapixel is actually created on a smartphone, and it's not true 50 megapixel. So keep that in mind when you're shooting with 50 megapixel. I personally shoot with the 24 megapixel on the smartphone. That way it doesn't create those false colors. At least it creates less false colors. And obviously some sort of camera is better than no camera in situations. But this is why I chose a full frame mirrorless camera, even though I have a Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Thanks for watching.